What is a conservation easement? That's today's episode. Let's dive into it.
Here we are at our very first rental property.
Hey everyone, I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natalie Morris.
And this is the Investing in Real Estate show. It's the show aimed at helping you build financial intelligence so you can build financial freedom. And on this show, a lot of times we like to sort of learn in public things that we're currently learning about that can maybe lower our taxes, help us build wealth in some appreciable way. And so that's what today's episode is all about. We're learning something new and want to share it with you.
Right. So our tax accountant suggested we learn something new. This is usually when I get homework when we're doing taxes.
But we both did homework on this one.
We did, right. And they sent us a bunch of PDFs to read. And thankfully I had a trip to the DMV, so I pulled it out and read it there. And they said, maybe you should consider a conservation easement. Do you know what that is? And I said, no, I do not.
Right.
So I started to read up on it. Now I want to be clear. We have not done this. We are not experts in it. We are trying to learn it. And we think maybe... this is now December 2019. It's unlikely we will do it for our 2019 taxes, but it plants the seed for possibly 2020, 2021. That's what we want to do for you. Just plant a seed, you know it exists, and then, okay, maybe, right?
Right, and so seek the advice of your tax accountant. And if you don't have a good real estate tax accountant, you absolutely should. We'll have a link below to a great team at Wealthability that does our taxes. They're fantastic, so check them out if you're interested. Now, I should say that we're thinking about, okay, maybe this is something we would do in 2019 taxes, but as you mentioned, we're not yet. We're still researching it, and it's like an arrow in our quiver. So it's something we might use at a later date and pull it out when we need to.
Okay, so let's get down to basics. What is this? Why do you need to know about it? What is a conservation easement? The simplest way to understand it is that you, owner of a piece of property, you must be an LLC that owns the property, will donate this land to the government. Now, that doesn't mean you don't retain rights to it. It means you sort of stamp down saying, this land will stay as it is in perpetuity. I'm donating it for conservation. Well, conservation of what?
Well, it could be historic district. It could be rights of land access. I remember when I lived in the state of Montana, there were easements, and the state had rights that everyone had access to riverways. Even if you had a property on a river, guess what? If I wanted to go down there and fly fish, that easement allowed me to go and do that.
Right.
So there are certain different easements there. So it's a historic access to lands.
Right. It's somehow precious, right? And you and the government together will agree it should stay as it is in perpetuity, right? So maybe there's a building on it that's historic. Maybe there's, some kind of natural use of it that the government wants to retain, right? So you, the LLC, donates the land to the government while still retaining the rights to use it. And then the land is forever stamped in time. Now, why would you do this?
Great question.
Baseline reason is, I guess I'm thinking kind of selfishly. So the first reason you should do this is maybe because you love the land.
You're like, oh, there's a beautiful geyser
Right.
here, so I want to donate this to the U.S. government, and other people can come and see this geyser or these caves or something else, right? That would be, I hope that might be your first consideration.
Right, is the love of Mother Earth and the appreciation for not overdeveloping our country.
But what's the other, maybe more business-friendly reason that you would want to do this? And why does the government sort of reward you for this? It's because it would lower your overall taxable burden as a result.
So you and the IRS file a tax return together now. You're partnered up in this land, right? And you say the land is worth X. And then you get the taxable deduction for donating that to the government, right? That doesn't mean then you can't, if there already was a historic rental property on there and you continue to rent it out and your LLC continues to collect rent, that still can happen, right? It's the amount of the donation that now you're lowering your taxes by in any given year. Now, this can continue to lower your tax rate in a way that's complicated, probably a little too complicated for this podcast. But it is an amazing way to think about in that one calendar year donating X amount, right? Or continuing to reap benefits in future calendar years.
Right, and we should be specific. This, as I understand it, at least at this stage in our learning journey of this, is that it just applies to land itself, the land use. So
Right.
if residential property on said land does not qualify under these rules, it would be the land underneath that particular building. Historically, though, that's another interesting, we know property in a historic district that took a long time to get renovated, nearly 2 years of renovation. It was a big project, and the historic district had, we had to go through all additional different permits because of the historic district. So that might be a property that would qualify under these guidelines.
Absolutely right. Yeah. Or you have a property and it's got a piece of it that's got like a beautiful stream on it. Is it possible the LLC apportions that off and donates it, right? You still have access to it, but it no longer belongs to the LLC, it belongs to the government and that piece of it. But then that also protects the stream. That means no one can ever go and improve it again. Now, these have been used by savvy investors for many years, but in the last, I want to say, decade or so, there have been some challenges to this because the IRS was noticing people doing this and taking large taxable deductions, and they didn't like it. Obviously, the IRS likes to collect your money rather than let you out of that, obviously. So they challenged it. And recently, the Trump administration signed into law legislation that means the IRS must have a specific reason to challenge your conservation easement. They can't just say, we see you took that. We're going to look into that. We're not sure if we like it. They have to specifically say why. So no more like cat and mouse games. So for now, this is a pretty solid thing to be doing.
Right, but governments change. And as our tax accountant reminded us, this could all change under a new administration. It could make it less favorable, and the government could come in and vote one way or the other. Congress could shift this law back the other way, which it might be less business friendly. So if someone has a conservation easement and decides to build upon that, they're lowering their taxable burden, but they're also building something for profit on this property. Is that going to be a problem?
Right. You have to have qualified people to help you do this. You can't just say, this land in my heart is worth $2 billion, right? There has to be a qualified appraisal of the land. And so there's an agreed upon value, right? Because I'm assuming you'd have some kind of attachment to the land. But what if you don't have anything you could donate to the government? Can you still take advantage of this?
That's an interesting question. Can you do it without having ownership?
You can. So let's say you've just looked in your balance sheet and you're like, I don't have anything to donate to the government. That's a piece of land that should stay as is. Well, in that case, you can invest into a syndication of a conservation easement. So some people will all go in together, invest their money, and then now you're in an LLC syndication with other people and you get your allocated deduction because you've put the money in. This is something, I'm just gonna read this example to you because I don't wanna get it wrong. So let's say, for instance, you find something that you can put $100,000 in, a conservation syndicate, right? And you get a $500,000 charitable contribution. Now let's assume you're at the highest federal tax rate, which is 43%, because that's 6% plus 37%. Then that would save you $215,000 because that's 500,000 times 43%, right? So you'd make money on your return of $100,000. You bought into something and you get 115% return almost immediately, right? But of course, the IRS is going to say, like, is this a real thing? Let's make sure, right? There has to actually be something attached to it, whether you own it or not. There are specialists who help you find these things. People that you go out and you say, I'd like to get in on this. Again, I want to say it's not just something you throw your money into because you want to be taxed less. It's something you think, well, the government wants to preserve our beautiful land. I'm in on that too. I'd like to put my money there and reap the benefits that the government is putting out there as an option.
We own a bunch of raw land, right?
We do.
We own a bunch of raw land in a beautiful area, and there's some wetlands area as well associated with it. This might be an opportunity, because I hadn't even thought of this until we started doing this show.
I had thought of this.
That this might be an opportunity for us to look into, because that land was expensive. It's a great space, and it could be an opportunity for us to protect the wetlands, to preserve that great space. Right?
My questions continue to abound, though, the more we research this, because could we then sell it? Like, we could never build a property on it, which was our original intention. Would we be able to sell it, or would we be able to sell it with the conservation easement only?
So these are all questions for our tax accountant.
Right, which might be good actually, because the neighbor wanted to buy it to make sure that it was unimproved. So we could sell it to the neighbor with the stipulation that it may not be improved. I don't know.
But we'd have to, these are questions for our tax accountant. And look, we should also say it can be very state specific as well, and community specific, because there might already be restrictions in place about what takes place on that land within the community.
Right.
So this is an interesting discussion to have with your local tax account, as well as like the local municipality, because there are already easements on this property. There are already waterway easements on this particular property.
Right.
So again, but killer strategy, right? I mean, when our tax accountant brought this to it, I said, this is an amazing strategy. If you have a lot of income in a particular year and you have real estate investments, would it not be smart maybe to roll and move some of those over into a conservation easement to lower your overall taxable burden, if this makes sense for you?
Yeah. So like I said, the questions just snowball when you start to learn something like this, which is the way it should be, right? So the Virgo in me wants to apologize for not having all the answers.
We don't have
but that's kind of the point.
By the way, our tax accountant didn't have all the answers either.
Right.
And we're sort of at the mercy of how the law is currently written with Congress. And as you know, under the most recent tax law, there's still a bunch of vagaries in that tax law that tax accountants, very smart CPAs, are hoping Congress will solidify, make less vague, clarify. I guess the word would be clarify, right? Clarify. So we don't have all the answers. Okay. We learn here. We give you the tools to kind of go out there and help you to start building wealth on your own. So that's today's episode, everyone. Go out there, take action, become a real estate investor, even if it's a conservation easement, if you can figure that out.
Maybe that.
Maybe we'll see you next time.